Hello and welcome to the Intersection with me, Graham Hughes. Today we have Hannah Janes, TikToker extraordinaire, on the show, and we've also got Supertanskiii in the flesh, almost, on Zoom. What we want to talk about today is growing up a woman in the 21st century. What were your sort of hopes and dreams for the future, and how has things turned out? As not in terms of your career or anything, but just as a woman.
I think I always thought that things would be better at this stage than they are, to be honest. I feel like, especially over the last few years, even though we're having much better conversations about things that are important and, women's issues and rights and things, that actually in many parts of the world, we've actually gone backwards.
Yeah.
Especially when we're discussing things like Roe v. Wade and rights over our own bodies. I think that's a great disappointment of mine, to see things that were so amazing come in at a time that were really needed be stripped from us now. And you kind of think, how has this happened? How have we ended up here? Yeah, disappointing to say the least.
How do you feel about it all, Tan?
A bit world weary. Because sexism, I'm sure Hannah can probably relate to this, has existed from school into the first jobs that you had. Like the first job that I had, there was just a manager and staff that would just think nothing about just slapping you on the arse to, that kind of thing.
Oh my God, so that actually happened in the 21st century.
Yeah, but I didn't even think about, I was 15 in my first ever waiting job. And then in my 20s, when I went for a job with someone that was like an acquaintance, I found out afterwards that he'd always intended to give the job to one of his male friends. But during the interview, he created extra checklists on his interview questions of, would I fuck her? Would I shag her? Would
oh my God.
In her yeah, I found that out afterwards. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then obviously, like, as you enter the online spaces, it just got progressively worse. From the very beginning of using online spaces, there was just horrific sexual comments from men, and that was just using it as someone that's not kind of making content. And then now, obviously, ever since from day one of me making videos, it's either even though I talk about politics, it's either overtly negative comments about my appearance or overly positive comments about my appearance, but yet still focused on the appearance, not the content of what I'm saying. And that's kind of like pervaded everything since day one, really, unfortunately. So at this point, like Hannah, I'm just a bit world weary, like because we get it from all directions all the time. We have a checklist before going out.
Yep.
We have a checklist like, don't wear your hair down, or don't wear your hair in a ponytail because it's easier for someone to grab you, or don't leave your drink. Don't, if you go out on a first date, you share your location with your mates. And they're like, oh, cool, have a good time, hope I hear from you. If not, hope you're not found in a ditch somewhere. That kind of, it's so weird how we've just kind of, it becomes routine. Taking precautions becomes routine. But even if you, and the pressure, if you don't meet one of those, you don't do one of those things right, you will get blamed for what happens to you. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a really interesting conversation with some of the girls in the studio I work in, and these girls they're young women, but they're younger than me, so I'll be 30 this year, and these are women in their early 20s who've already had horrendous experiences, who are saying that every time they go on a night out, and this is something that I do, but I thought I was maybe being overly cautious, they pull out a strand of their hair, they leave their fingerprints on the glass in taxis as an automatic.
What?
On top of sharing their location with either their partners or their parents or whatever they're doing. And these are late teens, early 20s. And they're already thinking, well, if something happens to me, at least there's evidence that I was here.
That's exactly it. That's exactly what I think of. Like, if I'm walking home, I'll think about, like where I will be seen on CCTV if they have to find me.
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing that goes through your head. Yeah, but the taxi that's another level. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah.
Well, speaking as a bloke, men never think about any of this stuff.
Of course
They
not.
never go out to a party and think, I hope no one sexually assaults me at this party.
Yeah.
And when we talk about male privilege and people who don't have much money and come from a working class background get the back up and say, I don't have any privilege, because they're comparing themselves against Jacob Rees-Mogg. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's not about that.
monetary
You
privilege
don't
they
even
think of.
think about it. And then you add another layer, a racial layer, if it's if a woman is walking down the street and she's of Asian heritage, there's an added layer of fear that exists, what doesn't exist for men, white cis men.
I agree with that, because there's that whole missing white woman syndrome that we've talked about before. I know that you and I personally have talked about it before. Whereas a white woman, like, I know that if I was to kind of go missing, it might be more likely to make the headlines. Whereas there was a missing black woman recently who didn't even make the headlines, and everyone was going, oh, well, there's a lot going on at the moment. It's like, well, when Sarah Everard went missing, COVID was at its peak, you know. So what they've got to worry about, people of color or women of color especially, is if they go missing, it's not even going to, no one's going to be looking for them. Like, it's not going to be on that, it's not going to be headline news. And that is horrific, and that just shows the bias of the media and about who they see as valuable, they see as valuable people, and it's not people of color. It just disgusts me. It disgusts me, and it must be even more, like, a million times more scary, especially when you look at the childbirth mortality rates for women of color too, because their pain is not believed, their pain is not legitimized. It's disgraceful.
Yeah, I mean, they're four times more likely to die in the UK.
Yeah.
Women of color.
Yeah, during childbirth.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
4 times.
Four times. Because their pain is not believed, they're not listened to, they're delegitimized. Women are generally, anyway, medical misogyny is a problem.
Yeah, massive problem.
Like, you're disregarded, or you're told that, you know, they might as well just say you're being hysterical.
I feel like that's it, isn't it? Like, especially because it's always blamed on, like, especially if you're overweight, or you're seen to be overweight, that's like apparently a signal of your health, which we all know is not true. If you're a larger person, that's not inherently, it means you're unhealthy or anything like that. But if you're overweight, or if you're a woman who has periods, it's either anxiety, it's depression, or, oh, could it be menstrual cramps, or is it period related? It's always that. It's never, there's something that you are saying that you know in yourself is not right, and we'll investigate it.
Yeah, and yeah, that's the problem. My friend, it took 9 years for her to get an endometriosis diagnosis, by which point she was infertile, because she was disregarded. Her pain, like, she was like vomiting, cramped up, like in a ball, in like severe pain. And the worst part of it is that some women that suffer, or people that suffer with endometriosis, they can't even get a hysterectomy, because it's not believed that they would not want a child. So the possibility of them bearing a child has more, is seen as more important than them not living, you know, living a life.
And the quality of life,
the quality of life. And doctors will not believe that they do not want to have kids, whereas a man can just get a vasectomy like that.
So there's so many issues facing women, not just around the world where we know there's horrific things happening, but there's such epic injustice going on in this country right now. Do you have, just in general, I mean, looking forward, do you have hope for the future, or do you think things are going to get worse before they get better?
I would love to say I feel like things are going to improve drastically, but I do not see that happening. I really don't. I see people like us having really good sort of conversations about the things that are going on, but I don't see any sort of legislative progress being made to protect us from things that are harmful within general society. And I also think that even though these discussions are happening, I'm still seeing an awful lot of behavior from men, because these discussions are happening, that have almost sort of riled them up more. Especially with the kind of content creation that I do. Obviously, you guys focus more on politics, and mine is political to a degree, but my sort of area of expertise is talking about misogyny and feminism. And I take a very, I feel, patient and calm approach, unlike some other creators who are sort of a bit more in your face with it, in order to hopefully sort of reach some men that may have just turned me off if I had said you're a misogynistic so and so. I want to take the time to explain, because I feel like that's helpful. Maybe someone might listen or go, oh, I hadn't actually thought about it that way. But the responses that I get, even though I feel like I'm very reasonable and calm and I take the time to explain things in a quite a logical and unemotional way, so that I don't come across as someone, I tone police myself effectively. I still get responses that are so defensive and rude and misogynistic. And much like you were saying, Tan, some of the things that are said to me, and it's appearance based, or it's, you know, comments about my body, and more often than not, it's not sort of taking into consideration the valid points that I'm making.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's incredibly frustrating and disheartening. I mean, I do have quite a few male followers who, and it's the regulars. I see the same people and over and over again, who are willing to listen and will hop to my defense in the comments and stuff. But that's a small portion of people, actually. And yeah, I don't know whether, obviously these conversations need to be had and progress needs to be made, but I feel like it's kind of riling the men up more, in my personal experience. Obviously that's anecdotal, because they don't like it.
No, because it's like they see it as pie, don't they? They think
Yeah.
that having a slice of equality takes away from them, but
Mm.
it's institutionally ingrained. I don't have much confidence. It's not just institutional though, in like every aspect of society, culturally. That's where it's like this kind of behavior towards women where you are essentially wrong by default. Or where men might claim to be feminists up until the point where they disagree with a woman, and then any respect that they might want to give her is taken away.
Yeah.
But I don't have an awful amount of faith, but I think that a lot of it needs to come from men. Men need to fix this, because just like the way that, you know, maybe a white person might get through to another white person about racism, purely because they're not going to have that level of respect necessarily. The same thing applies with misogyny. A problematic man's not necessarily going to listen to a woman about it. But if another man steps in and goes, no, this isn't cool, this is, you know, you need to step up. But then whilst men are getting really defensive about it, that's just not going to happen. Like it's not enough men call it out. Some do, like you say, I've got some weird, really wicked followers that are men that are respectful, they're decent, they see me as a valid human being just from what I say. They don't feel the need to try and tear me down. But there is this attitude where if a woman is strong or outspoken, they feel the need to pull you down a peg or two. And you know, trolls have admitted as such. Friends that people that used to be friends that turned into trolls of mine, which is a massive betrayal, have admitted that they feel entitled to the space that I have, and that they feel that they should bring me down a peg or two because I'm, you know, standing up for what I believe in. That attitude is so common. But how do you, when statues have greater protections than women, what the hell are you going to do about it? Like literally, you would get a bigger jail sentence for damaging a statue of Margaret Thatcher than you would for raping a woman. And also there's the aspect that women are more likely to get a rape conviction if they're killed during the rape or after the rape. A dead woman is more likely to posthumously get a rape conviction than a woman that lives. So these are our laws. The people making our laws are massive misogynists. The police force, the people that would solve the crime, are massively misogynistic. So I don't know about you, Hannah, but I just feel most of the time just impotent with rage, like just full of rage. Like I just don't even know what to do with it. But then you get so numb to the constant stream of headlines of another woman killed by her boyfriend, another woman just like raped locally, you know, another young woman spiked. You know, you hear stories of 19-year-olds wearing thick denim jackets on nights out so that the needles that people were using to spike them won't go through. your friend leaving bloody DNA behind in cabs. I mean, we need men to be a part of the solution on this en masse. And until they are, we're not going to get anywhere. But I don't feel like they will, because they like, generally, however unconsciously, the upper hand. That's what I feel is the situation, broadly.
I don't think you're wrong at all. I think that there is a huge problem with men talking to each other about these issues. I mean, men don't like talking about this stuff anyway. They'd rather talk about the football. And also, I mean, I know as well as you do, like a lot of men, they feel, you know, this line about when you're used to privilege, equality feels like oppression. And they feel like something's been taken away from you. Like you said, Tan, about the pie, they feel like they're having their pie taken away.
Not pie.
When, yeah, when this is sensible stuff that we all should be doing and all being aware of. And it can be simple stuff like I was told when I was in university, I remember walking down the street with my mate and he said we should cross the road. And I'm like, why? It was nighttime. We were coming back from a club in Manchester. I said, because there's a woman up ahead and she might get a bit freaked out if two men are walking behind her. And I was like, oh, okay. So we crossed the road. Up to that point, that I had never considered that until another man said to me, hey, Graham, you know, you should think about this. It never even cropped up in my head. So it's one of the reasons why I feel it's important to have a show like this, a discussion like this. And I don't want people attacking me saying, oh, you know, you're a white man. You're a white man, Graham. What else has got to do with you? Because in a way, feminism has everything to do with men as well, because it is their attitudes that are holding feminism back, and the ability for women to just live a nice life where they don't have to walk around in constant fear of horrible things being done to them by men who'll bloody get away with it. I mean, that's got to be the one that is just, what is it now? 1% of rapes ending in a conviction? Is it even that?
If that, There's also domestic abuse. I know at least 5 women that have suffered, like 2 of them suffered life-changing injuries as a consequence of domestic abuse. All those men are free. I don't know a single woman that's not been sexually harassed, assaulted, or raped, and none of those men are in prison. You know what I mean? Like, these men are free to just do it again and again and again. So where is the deterrent? Why wouldn't they? We're just operating on good faith that a man's not going to do this to us, or if we do fall in love with a man, that he's not going to murder us.
Yeah. And Hannah, do you want to come in on this and talk about hashtag not all men?
So this is something that it's one of those hashtags that really riles up the blokes, and it's something that, if I'm honest, I tone police myself on. So occasionally I will use the hashtag, but it's something that I'm very careful not to say in my content that I create, which is a shame because it's what I believe. But I feel like the response to it is all men, because I'm sorry, but it is, and that means that it's the responsibility of all men to call out those kinds of behaviours that are harmful or lead to violence against women and girls. That is the crux of it. So it doesn't mean that every one of you is a rapist. That's not what we're saying. It means that it is all of your collective responsibility to help to solve these problems from inside the house. So this hashtag not all men was a hashtag that was made by men for men in response to women asking them to call out shitty behaviour, which is frankly the bare minimum.
Yes.
And it's something that you can probably tell by the tone of my voice, I'm full of rage that there had to be a hashtag in response to a very logical explanation of why we need your help.
It proper winds me up. Not that one in particular, because obviously that came a little bit later, but during the Brexit wars from 2016 onwards, whenever I on social media pointed out that older people were more likely to have voted for Brexit, which is a statistical, a fact. It's just counting. I would inevitably get a deluge of people who have been on marches with me or have been shared platforms with me, screaming and shouting about Brexit being a bad idea. And it would always be not all old people. And I'm like, I didn't say it was all old people. And I always had to make that thing, and I feel like they're just saying, it's not me, I'm not doing it. And I'm like, yeah, okay, great. I didn't say you were, but you're really, really not helping here. And so
Yeah.
what I'd like to ask is first to Hannah and then to Tan, is like, what more can I do, and what more can men like me do to further this discussion and protect women from the onslaught of shit that they're having to put up with at the moment in this country or around the world?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that you're already doing that. You're doing it, because as much as I would love to have like an all women's podcast and do something and have these discussions, because you are a white man, you are helping to raise our voices. And unfortunately, this is a fact. Just having you do this and, you know, have us on and create content like this, you're going to be listened to much more than Tan or I will be. That's just a blanket. That's just how that works, unfortunately. It's the same with sort of TikTok or any other sort of content creation. I could say the exact same thing, but provide you with a better explanation for why it's harmful, or you know, provide my anecdotal experiences to back those things up. I could do that, and a man could have done it, and I will receive the abuse and he would not. So you're already doing it by raising us up.
Exactly.
So first of all, thank you. Because it's needed. It's sad that it needs to happen, but it's true. And the second one is just simply calling out the behavior. You know, noticing those little things, or even having discussions with the women in your lives about, you know, ask them that same question, because my response due to my lived experiences might be very different from someone else's. You know, some women don't mind catcalling. I do, because I've had some scary experiences. Everyone's going to feel different about that question, depending on their lived experiences, because we all experience it differently. You know, we were talking about intersectionality on this podcast, obviously. So my experience as a white, privileged, middle-class woman will be very different to someone who is of Asian descent, or, you know, and I think that's really important to bear in mind as well. So different women from different demographics are going to have different experiences and want help in different ways. I think broadly for me, on a personal level, having conversations like this, giving lots of different kinds of women a platform to speak about their lived experiences, is really important. So getting other guests on and things on shows like this is really good. And yeah, asking your friends and family, ask your sister, ask your mum, ask their friends, and yeah, call out the behavior when you see it. This locker room talk that, you know, Trump was all over, like, it's all boys do it. And, you know, we can all take a joke, but there's a point when that joke could be taken further and further, and that joke turns into slapping the waitress on the arse and then harassing them while they're trying to work, and then waiting until the pub closes to stand outside. And those tiny behaviours feed into this societal culture that we have going on, where women are to be seen and not heard, and we're there for your sexual gratification. And it's really important to call out the small behaviours, because those can escalate. So that would be, yeah, my view on that, is talk to your friends and go, hey bud, that's not cool, even if it feels awkward or embarrassing to do that.
I think believing women and listening to women is where it starts, because, as I said, there's a lot of attitudes out there where women are, as a default, wrong, and we're not heard and listened to. And there's that aspect that we're there purely, like the old what is it, smile, when men tell you to smile, as if we're there
Cheer up, love, it might never happen.
I do this specific thing when men do that, where I pull my lip over my teeth and just do like a smile at them. But that just sends the message that a woman is there for your aesthetic pleasure, you know. And it's like, no, mate, no. Men talking to each other and having these conversations is really important, because that's where it starts. Raising your sons right is a good place to start, and not seeing that purely as a woman's responsibility to do it. I mean, like engaged fathers having these conversations. But yeah, like I don't really know where to begin, really. I mean, platforming women's really important, but also I think a really important aspect of this is, I mean, Phoebe Waller-Bridge is a great example of it, of giving women need more space in terms of film and TV to show a woman's experience, because a lot of men approached me after watching Fleabag and they were like, I didn't know women thought like this. I didn't know women, and I didn't know women could be funny, one of the guys said. And I was like, what? You know, and I was like, well,
I didn't know women could be funny.
What a sad life you've lived. One of my ex's friends said that. Oh, I've never met a funny woman before. I was like, well, you've had a shit life then, haven't you, mate? Like, but like, yeah, I mean, there's that whole thing, humor, every aspect that you could go into, like comedy, TV, you know, there's just not enough female voices telling female like experiences. And that means that we're missing out on a whole different world of stories and outlooks. And that feeds into the cultural perception. As we all know, that kind of stuff feeds into wider culture and wider cultural conversations. I mean, frankly, we're a bit lacking in that nowadays. I mean, I think the last great kind of renaissance in that area was kind of probably around the 90s, really. Maybe I'm looking back at that through rose-tinted glasses because I was like a young teen in the late 90s and stuff. But then you look back at how telly treated women then. You look at the Paula Yates documentary that showed just how horrifically women were treated by the press. I think the press feeds into it too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Massively. I mean, you look at the headlines back then, they were shocking, but I think the headlines now are going to be shocking. Well, they are now already, but in 5 years' time, we're going to look back and go, what? But generally, it comes down to conversations, installing good morals in kids. I think these conversations need to begin in school. I think there needs to be, like, if I had my way, there would be political and social justice kind of stuff on the curriculum, really. But there's a reason why there's not, isn't there? But it comes down to men calling out other men. It comes down to men. Every woman like knows a friend that has suffered something. So every man must therefore more or less know a guy that's done it, but they all claim not to. We need to kind of, at the root of this, get down to the root, and that starts with conversations. That starts with not being lazy. It starts with teaching people to respect women for their voice, not just how they look to you, whether positive or negative, because it happens negatively too. Like, a woman will be automatically seen as less than if she doesn't fit the societal mold of what is attractive. And then she will also be seen as less than if she does fit the societal mold of what's attractive.
From my sort of experience growing up in the 80s and 90s, every single TV show or, film in which there was a romantic subplot, whatever, it was generally the guy would badger a woman who wasn't interested until one day she was magically interested. And so that's, honestly, as a teenager, that's how I thought you got a girlfriend, because I didn't know any better, because that's all the stuff I consumed. There were no female directors, very few at the time, and you were not getting too many stories told from a woman's point of view. There were so few films where two women actually had a freaking conversation.
It wasn't about a man.
I find that women writers are good at writing male characters, whereas male writers are not that good at writing female characters. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yeah, because with tits.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that by far the best Star Wars film was the one that was written by a woman, which was Empire Strikes Back. It was written by Leah Brackett.
Really?
Yeah, she was from the golden age of Hollywood. I think she worked on some of the great sort of film noirs, and I think it was one of her last films that she wrote was Empire Strikes Back.
Jesus, I had no idea about that. Yeah, I mean, but you're right. But that what you've just described is pretty much most experiences that I had with men growing up as a teenager.
Yeah, if they hassle you enough, you'll relent, and then you'll go out with them.
They break you down.
Yeah.
Or you'll feel sorry for them. You'll take pity on them, and then, wedding bells.
It's like the incel culture. Like, these men feel entitled to women to the extent where they're like, "But I've been nice to her. Why won't she have sex with me?" As if that whole nice guy thing.
Oh.
Yes.
The whole TM nice guy nonsense. It's like, but I was nice to you. I took you out here. Why won't you have sex with me? It's like, that's not how it works, mate. You don't. It's not a transaction.
No.
It's what the hell? And then women are made to feel bad if they don't relent. And you know what I mean? That's not how sexual attraction works. That's not how relationships work.
Yeah, well, we should talk about the incel culture because this is bizarre. I mean, it is people who are proud of being virgins, people who are proud of the fact they can't pick up.
Well, I assume most of my trolls are incels.
Yeah, same.
But whereas Hannah takes a totally different approach to this, like you are very moderate. I've got to the point where I'm so sick of it. I'm so like war weary after 2 years now that I just realized that if I try and explain it nicely, they're not gonna be decent about it. So I just fucking go in all guns blazing. They just give me even more, but I'm thinking I'm gonna get the shit anyway, so I might as well jab back. So I don't suffer fools gladly, which they fucking hate, obviously.
Yeah.
But with the incels, like I assume that a lot of them are by default, because of the bizarre attitude that they have towards women and the entitled attitude and the way that they assume. I make political content, but they assume, a lot of them accuse me of only making content so that men will fuck me, basically. They literally say that, so men will F me. That's the only reason that I make content. They accuse me of having a subscription service where I give centrist dads foot pictures. And
that's so random. What?
But they do. I mean, I think they're kind of, their desires are coming out there. But the whole thing around sex work. Firstly, sex work. They're denigrating sex workers. Secondly, I'm evidently not a sex worker, and I'd probably make loads of more money if I was selling bloody feet pictures. You know, I'd make a profit. I'd break even. But it always comes back to this sexual aspect. It's always a sexual thing, and that's what makes me think that a lot of the trolls online that attack women specifically, because male political content creators don't get this kind of treatment, it makes me think that it comes down to their inherent lack of success with women. I've had real incels, I've had real incels giving it the big un. But it's just this weird sense of entitlement. It's this, oh, woe is me. Mate, if you had a bath, you treated a woman like just a normal human being, you know, like you would anybody else. Women aren't that difficult because the bar is so fucking low nowadays.
It's in hell.
The bar is like a really low limbo hole. All you've got to do is just be decent to us and we'll probably go out with you. You know what I mean? Like,
have a bath first, though. I'm glad you put that in there. Have a bath. Be decent.
Wash your because a lot of them don't. Like a lot of they don't.
It's interesting, isn't it, that they don't get mad at the men who are taking the women from them because the woman that they like is going out with the high school jock or whatever. They don't get angry with the jock. They get angry with the woman for making the wrong choice.
Our fault.
Yeah. A lot of women aren't interested in that type of guy anyway. Like loads of women really aren't. Like I know that I'm not. I know that I'm not looking for some muscle-clad fella. I'm just looking for a decent guy that's like not a plastic feminist. That's, you know, because there's a problem with plastic feminists too. Let's talk about plastic feminists. So how would you define a plastic feminist? A man that claims to be feminist but is actually really problematic, falls into the nice guy trope. That will kind of have, claim he's standing up for feminism, but treat a woman like absolute shite that he's dating. That will fall back into those like really, rubbish behaviors. So it's someone that's like kind of pretending to be woke, essentially. That really isn't. I don't know if have you had run-in with plastic feminist? You must have.
Of course I have, yeah, a few. I mean, and it's all sort of like very basic, frivolous, sort of like surface level style regurgitation of, someone on the internet, such as myself, or your thoughts on feminism, or, trying to have conversations with me that they don't get deep enough so that it's very quickly realised that some of your behaviours are already red flags to me, and also you don't have that deeper level of critical thought surrounding the topic of conversation. There's nothing to add, there's nothing to discuss. It's all very pro women's rights and but there's no depth there, and it's performative, shall we say.
Performative, and they get defensive. You know that it's a plastic feminist when they get defensive.
Yeah,
and they start self-applying it. So it's like when you're dealing with someone that you're trying to talk to about racism, and they go, but I'm not racist. Like you were saying with the Brexit thing, Graham. I'm old.
Yeah.
I didn't vote for Brexit. It's not about you, mate. It's about the bigger problem.
Yeah.
And by self-applying it and making it all about you and anecdotal, you're ignoring, and you're creating more work with these straw mans too for us. You're exhausting us.
Yeah.
You are absolutely exhausting us, because we're having to expend even more emotional labor explaining the blindingly obvious to you, instead of you just getting it, realizing that if you don't fall into that bracket, it's not about you. Because that's what a lot of people don't realize, is they're like, oh, you're giving them, like, no, we're not tarring you with the same brush. If you relate to any of this, you're a part of the problem. If you don't, you're not. So just get on board with it. It's just exhausting. It feels like banging your head against a brick wall. Meanwhile, 3 women per week are being murdered by their ex-partners. Meanwhile, we're getting killed. We're too busy getting, raped, killed, sexually assaulted, harassed, day in, day out, completing an exhaustive checklist. And all you've got to do is have a conversation, it gets on my tits.
Well, I think it's very true. The least that we can do, and I often say this about history, about the British Empire, about our links to the transatlantic slave trade, which went on for 200 years. I keep having to point this out to people. And it's the very, very least we can do is know about it. That is it.
Absolutely.
Forget about having an opinion or writing a thesis or whatever. Just know that this stuff happened. Know that the British got annoyed with China for not selling, the opium, because we were trying to sell smack to the Chinese, and they wouldn't sell it. So we burnt down the Summer Palace in China. We went into Nigeria and we sacked a palace in the Kingdom of Benin, and we stole the Benin bronzes, and we messed them all up. They were all in chronological order. And because we took them all down, nobody knows what order those bronzes are in. And they told the entire history of the Benin people. I mean, the crimes that we've committed in the past. And I was like, the least we could do is know. That's it. That's all I'm asking anyone. And just go, okay. But people feel like that acknowledgement somehow tars them with the same brush. If I'm talking to someone from a developing nation who says, you British did this thing, my first instinct now, because I'm a grown-up, isn't to go, well, I didn't do it. Because I know that's not going to help. And what they want is for them to be able to say what this grievance is, what this injustice was, and for me to just take it on board, just shut up and take it on board. So that's what I'd like to see a lot more of in this conversation. And I feel like it in a way, feminism has been hijacked again, like it was in the 70s when it was all about burning bras. No, it wasn't. It was about equality for women. Oh yeah, but they're burning bras. No one was burning bras. It was just made up. It was like one person in a university somewhere for a prank. Thought it would be funny to do this. Do you know what I mean? And suddenly, that's what it's all about. And now you're seeing feminism hijacked by transphobes who want to, make every question, no matter what it is can a woman have a penis? Can a man have a baby? And you're like, this has got nothing to do with the struggle of women in society today to just I'm not even talking about equality here. I'm just talking about living without the stress of just what men could do.
And reducing us to reproductive organs. Some cis women can't even have kids. Bringing back the notion of gender stereotypes and gender roles, and how women should look like feminine and like a 1950s pinup, and then we'll be allowed to use the loo. I mean, it's insulting. And it's just, unfortunately, it's loads of people just falling for a right-wing culture war. And they are, that's what it is. They're like getting drawn into this red meat debate that's been generated to prey on some of the most vulnerable people in society, be it trans people, people of color. And it is just bringing back, it's just taking us back mentally, on every level. And it's not helping women. And the only feminism that I recognize is intersectional feminism. If it's not intersectional, it's performative.
Yeah, totally agree.
And a lot of them are really offensive. And as with cis women, it's whether trans women or cis women, we're the ones that get the shitty end of the stick. We're all in the same shitty boat, getting like crap, getting beaten, getting murdered. It makes me so angry. And that such a a group of people that are treated so horrifically are having to face this extra burden. And from women, what?
From women, it's worse to me when it's coming from other women, because trans women being trans women takes nothing away from me.
It's not right.
No, exactly. I'm happy to share. Like, you're fine. Be who you are. It doesn't affect me in the slightest. I know that I'm a woman. I'm a woman in my own way. Every woman's a woman differently. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't affect me. I just want you to be safe and happy. Using inclusive language doesn't offend me or take away from my own version of my womanhood in any way whatsoever. Asking me if I'd like to be called a mother or a birthing person gives me an option. It doesn't offend me in any way.
Plus, you can use both anyway. I mean, you could just, if you're that bothered by it, just use both. Just say mother or parent. Like, you don't have to necessarily, you know, it really does not make a shit of difference. It's not taking away from anything to include people. Yeah, it's enraging, frankly. Like what you were saying about it was interesting what you were saying about the history there. Because what I thought was really interesting about another woman that's been torn down by the media, Meghan Markle and Harry's documentary, how they managed to include the history of the royals and the slavery and how the slave owners were paid off for their human property. They managed to get that into a documentary that went out to millions of people and gave an education to millions of people. But, you know, you look at how in general, like the press tears down women. They still do it. They did it with every kind of pop star or celebrity in the 90s. Look at what they did to Sienna Miller. Like, what was it? They leaked information about her abortion or something, and they were hacking the phones of dead kids. And I think the media's got a huge part to play also, not just beyond the kind of like the, you know, the micro aspect of it, but you look at like the wider media. Our politics and our society is going to continue to be polluted by the outlook of white billionaires and their misogynistic attitudes until the whole thing is just torn down. I think that reaches so many people, and we need to focus on the press and how the press treat people. I mean, obviously men suffer terribly with it too. I mean, look at some of the male celebrities and what was leaked about them and how their privacy was invaded. But generally speaking, white billionaires own these spaces, and we need press reform. And I think that's a big part of how we solve it, because that influences millions of people.
Talking about the media and sort of the environment that I grew up in the 90s, like I've apologized to some of my female friends for the way I behaved when I was younger. Saying inappropriate things. Yeah. I mean, like, I thought I was having a laugh. I thought it was funny, but there was a part of me that knew it was wrong, that knew I shouldn't really be doing this. And then when I got away with it, I was like, oh, I got away with that. Isn't that hilarious? And I didn't stop to think how that might have affected my friends. You know, we were on a night out and I was having a drink and just having a laugh about stuff, and that might have said something that was hurtful. And I've had conversations with some of my female friends about this, and they've said to me, yeah, it was. And they didn't feel at the time that it was appropriate to call me out on it, that was because of society. That it was just what men did. You know, it's just great being funny, when actually, you know, I'm deeply ashamed and embarrassed about some of the things I've done in the past. And I can't just go, oh, well, I was young and stupid, because like I say, there was a part of me, even then, even growing up in the 90s, that knew that I shouldn't be doing this.
How have you, when you have, I mean, I presume you have conversations like this with men, you know, if you do have conversations about feminism, how is it received by them?
Generally, my group of friends are all neurodiverse, bisexual, gods and goddesses amongst men. So you know what I mean? Like, my mates are generally sound about stuff like this, and we do talk about it. One of the big conversations I had when I came back from Australia over 10 years ago now was the attitude of Australians to people of colour, and especially towards the Australian Aboriginals, which is abhorrent. generally. Hashtag not all Australians are racist, but a lot of them are.
Same
And
experience, yeah.
having those conversations, even with, you know, my Australian friends, was a lot easier than having it with other just random Australians who were just being horrible. So yeah, I've had conversations, but I'm always looking for more information. You know, I always want to know more. It's just the way my brain works. I'm just like, right, go down a Wikipedia hole. Input, more stimulation.
I
ADHD.
understand. Yeah.
And so yeah, talking about this stuff I think is so important. And I think that the Me Too movement was so important that it came out and people started talking about this openly, because it had been a bit like the way in the 1970s, like it was a bit of a joke that a priest might be a kiddie fiddler. No, that priest who was being paid by the Catholic Church or whoever was raping children. That's what was happening in that situation. There wasn't anything funny about it. There wasn't anything, you know, pantomime, comical, villain. No, it was absolutely horrific. And I think that attitude now, obviously, everyone just sees it as horrific because we've had that conversation. And I still don't think we're quite there with feminism and women's rights and the way that women should be treated and the way that women should be allowed to feel just walking down the goddamn street or going to a nightclub.
Yeah, it's been normalized as well, hasn't it? I mean, when it gets to a point where you're seeing like the 5th woman in a row that's gone missing, presumed dead on the telly, it almost doesn't shock people anymore. And it's generally a white woman, let's face it, that they're gonna talk about that it's happened to. But one of the things that I really hate about the conversations that tend to happen is like when people go, well, like if a man is trying to kind of call out a man, to be fair, he is trying, bless him, but he'll go, what if it was your mum or your sister? And it's like, what? So we have to kind of ingratiate ourselves. We have to, in order for you to relate to a woman, you have to think of her as someone that you know. It's like women, regardless of whether or not they're your mum or your sister, deserve respect. That's what the whole point of it is. And it really grinds my gears when I see that, even though I know that the person's trying to help. So I tend not to call it out. It's like women in that.
I think though, Tan, that isn't that some way of getting through to people that might not otherwise, you wouldn't be able to get through to them.
Possibly, but the problem is, like, why don't these people relate to women as that anyway?
Humans.
As humans.
They're idiots.
Well, of course they are. I know that, you know that, but it really bothers me because, like, sadly, this is exactly what people of color were having to do during the during the Black Lives Matter thing. It broke my heart to see videos that the black men were making, explaining that they've got a family, explaining what their hobbies and their interests were, because they were trying to humanize themselves.
Yeah.
And it's like, what the you should not be having to do this. And I see kind of like with women, it's almost like we have to humanize ourselves in order to be treated with basic respect by people. And that's the thing that I find really sad. And as I said, I don't call them out because that's generally men trying to get through to other men saying it. So it's a positive step. But God, when you're getting to the point whereas, you know, one of the other primary genders, you're having to kind of humanize yourself to the other, to the one with all the power and the privilege. I mean, look at the state we're in for us to have to get to that point, you know?
I think also, I mean, that point about humanizing people, it is horribly, it is human psychology. You think about a charity, if they put a picture of a bunch of children who are starving on an advert for the charity asking for money, they get less money than if they put one child on the advert and say, this is, you know, John or whatever their name is, and they live in a village and they haven't got any water. And because you've humanized them in that way, people are more likely to give money. And I think that is something that, unfortunately, and I absolutely agree with you, Tan, that it shouldn't be this way. But I see this with refugees, where people just think that all refugees are here to steal money, I guess, and also they're all goat farmers. And I'm like, no, that's honestly not the case. There's architects and doctors and nurses and school teachers and, you know, every profession you could think of wanting to come to a safe place to raise their families, which I think is fair enough. But the media have done such a good job of dehumanizing these people. I do think that it is unfortunately necessary to push back against that by saying, no, these are real people and these are their real stories. And I would like to see more of that in sort of, you know, investigative journalism on TV, where they actually bother to go and speak to refugees about their lives and why they're here and stuff like that. We never really see that. All we
I
see is
completely
angry
agree.
old white men on the telly go, no, Britain's full,
Yeah, no,
etc.
I agree with you in terms of refugees, absolutely. But in the context of it being kind of what has been seen as the primary other gender for centuries, it's kind of like, what?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know better than it, you choose not to, you know, not you predominantly. Not pointing the finger at you, you're doing a sound job here, but yeah, but no, I totally agree in terms of like, and also another thing to consider in terms of, you know, globally in war, in desperate situations, it's the women that are most vulnerable, women that are used as a weapon of war to be raped and treated appallingly.
Yeah,
it's always the women that kind of suffer the worst abuses, and that's deliberate, isn't it, to dehumanize and tear down and break the spirit of places.
yeah.
I mean, look, maternity hospitals bombed in Ukraine, you know,
It's
just
awful.
it's beyond belief. Tales of like rape coming out of there. I mean, yeah, so globally we've got our own issues here, but obviously globally, anything that a white woman in Britain is suffering, a woman of color in Britain is suffering worse. Same applies kind of globally, really. Cheerful, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say just a little bit of a change to what we were sort of the doom and gloom. If Labour get a massive landslide in the next election, which I guess we're all hoping that they will, what would you like to see a future Labour government doing in terms of feminism, equality, and equal rights?
It's hard, isn't it? Because there's so much to work on. I think education around treatment of women and better sex education and things like that in schools, because I think we need to start there, because I feel like the earlier you get those behaviors and those attitudes towards younger women, it's like when you're you know, when you're in the playground, and I know certainly when I was at school, if like the boy spat at you or he punched you in the arm, he liked you. It's that kind of stuff, and I'm sure that, you know, to a degree it goes on, and maybe for some kids it doesn't, but I think talking about things like consent and what that really means and things like that, especially for sort of like, you know, your teenagers and stuff, where kids are exploring things really early now, earlier than like we would have done. And they have access to things like porn, which obviously is really unhealthy for young brains that think that that's actually how adults do that. So I think having those open discussions that are sort of age appropriate within schools is really important. So I'd like to see some of that implemented. I'm sure that, you know, parents will have a field day and maybe some of them will not want that to happen. But I do feel like parents need to be aware that their children are seeing things that they don't think they are, because they have access to the internet. And if they're not looking for it, their friends are probably showing them. Do you know what I mean? I feel like we need to sort of open our eyes a bit where that stuff is concerned. I think things like stalking and internet abuse also needs some work, because abuse and harassment is abuse. I know, you know, you and I, Tan, have had some really awful experiences where that is concerned. And I do think the abuse for women is different. It feels like blokes might call each other names and disappear, but I feel like, I know from my own anecdotal experience, of course, that it's very violent and it's very sexual and it's very determined. I mean, 6 weeks after I posted a video on, I can't remember even what it was on now, but it offended some men for sure, as my content usually does. For weeks afterwards, I had a number of people that were just harassing my Instagram, and it was always like violent rape things. Not just, oh, you're a stupid so and so. It was very sexually violent and purposeful. So I feel like, you know, being able to document that and take it to the police and go, here are the names, here are the usernames. This is now scary, because it is always, even if it's something that you experience frequently, and having something done about it. And stalking is the same. I've had friends who've had really bad experiences or really scary experiences where things are happening, or the guy stood at the end of the street because that's as close as he can get to you with the restraining order and stuff. But I'm really sorry, we can't do anything until he actually does something to you. So he's got to nearly kill me or something before you take action, or kill you, or actually, yeah. It's stuff like that that I would really like to see improvements on, I think. That need to happen very quickly, because, you know, women's safety is a real serious issue. And I think sentencing for things like this as well needs to be upped, because I should have more rights than the fucking statue. You know, it's people over things, and we're not seeing that legislated, I don't feel.
Well, you've covered a broad section of once again. Awesome. Yeah, I think repealing laws is really important. I mean, one of the people think that when Labour get in, or if, God, I hope we don't end up with another 92 moment, because I think I would actually probably drown myself in.
I'm leaving the country, Tan. I'm out of here. Come with me to Panama. Let's run away. Let's run away together.
Yeah. Run away together. But I there's so much that I want them to repeal. In terms of God, I can't even say it, bloody hell, authoritarian laws that have been brought in by the Conservatives. But the thing is, God, they're going to have a list longer than a fucking Leonard Cohen song of things they're going to have to try and like sort out. So I feel like one of the primary things that's important is fixing the police, rooting out the crap. I mean, I see some merits in some forms of like abolitionist theory, to be honest with you. I just think tear the whole fucking thing down, you know. But you know, we can't have complete anarchy, unfortunately. Yeah, I think repealing laws, implementing laws, removing bloody spy cops, for Christ's sake, and having like getting the crime, what's it called when someone is sentenced, the sentencing rate up for rape, because unfortunately I don't know if I was talking to you about this, Graham, but a lot of them don't actually. A lot of rape campaigners call for the sentence not to be increased, because apparently it's less likely to result in a conviction for a man, because
the burden of proof would be
his life.
Oh God.
The whole like, so you're even having to take into consideration a man's life for a heinous crime that he's committed. So I don't know if we can necessarily even legislate your way out of it. I think what you were saying about starting early is really important, getting this happening in schools, and also making, I think societally, making misogyny like just disgusting and outdated and seen as something that is just like, ugh. You know, that's what we really need, is for it to just be seen as, you know, the way that most decent people see racism, I guess. Like, oh God, like what is wrong? Where people are actually ostracized for subscribing to that nonsense. But I don't understand. I don't know if Labour can actually really. I mean, in one term, definitely not, because there's going to be a mountain of crap for them to fix. The country's on its arse on every conceivable level. But I think Jess Phillips done some really good stuff for violence against women and girls. Every International Women's Day, she reads out the list, ever increasing list of women murdered by their ex or current partners. But then there's a lot of work that they need to do around it. So in short, I don't know. I really don't. Like, I wish I had the answers, but
a couple of things that I would do, because, you know, I'll just come in with me bloody size 10s and just stomp all over everything. First of all,
mansplain it to us now, are you, Graham?
Yeah, I'm going to mansplain it. No, I'm not explaining it. I'm just going to say what I would do if I was in charge, which is probably one of the reasons why I'll never be in charge. First of all, at the moment, you were talking about if a woman is raped, she's more likely to get a conviction if she's dead. That's because in those cases, it's up to the man to prove that he didn't rape the woman. So the balance of justice is on him proving that he didn't do this horrific thing. I think that should be standard. I think that all women who say, I'm sorry, someone sexually assaulted me, I think it should be up to the bloke to prove that they didn't, using CCTV, using all their messages on their phone, whatever they've got, to prove that they didn't do this thing.
Absolutely.
Because that will put a lot of men on the back foot. And all the people go, oh, well, what about women who make things up about it? Okay, then, prove you're innocent.
I think
and the other thing I would do is, if there is a murder of a woman, and I would say, right, curfew for men. You know the way they say, oh, women shouldn't go out after dark because there's been a murder in the area. No. Not women, men.
I agree.
Men can't go out to the pub after 8 o'clock until we catch this killer.
Do
you know what? They will catch that bloody killer the next day.
They kicked off a couple of years ago, wasn't it, when someone suggested that?
Yeah.
But that is the answer.
That's the answer. Put it on the men. Put it on the men.
We're not doing it.
Look, I'm a man. We've had it easy for centuries, right? It's time for us to be put on the back foot a little bit. I'll probably get a load of shit in this in the comments, but that's what I would do. Yeah. People are like, I'm not voting for you, Graham.
It's smart though, isn't it? It is smart. That would be, they wouldn't like it one bit, but I get this response often in my comments especially when all that curfew talk was going around a couple of years ago. And it was really interesting to see them go, excuse me. And it's like, well, the women already do all the work. We are careful, we hold our keys, we back into a space, or got a car door between me and you.
No headphones at night.
Or like have one in and the other one out, or the ponytail, and not running down dark alleys, and we do all these things. And it's like that men's behavior is the problem. And when I say that, men are like, yeah, but men are victims of violence as well. Do you know who are the perpetrators of violence against men? Other men. You are at risk by other men. It's all you. You can't argue this, because the statistics show that is just fact. Yeah. It's
upper 90 percentile of all violent crime and sexual violence is committed by men globally. Like this is the issue. Like if I'm walking down the street and I look up behind me and I see a woman, I'm not afraid.
No, I'm not bothered.
I'm like, thank God there's someone walking along the same route as me. And then I worry for her when I turn off onto my road. I think, oh God, I hope she's going to be all right. You never get that fear with other women. But what you were saying about the curfew is spot on, because we're not committing the crimes. And if you guys are really pissed off about being kept in after 6 p.m, deal with the problem in your gender then. Deal with the men. Deal with the men that are doing this if you want to be let out. And they will fix it. Like with the whole Roe versus Wade thing. If men, if cis men could get pregnant, you could get a bloody abortion on the corner at on your lunch break. There wouldn't even be an issue with it.
But if 99% of all accusations of rape resulted in a criminal charge, in actually a sentence, I mean, men would be the ones taking the precautions and making absolutely 100% sure that before they do something with someone else, that they're happy to go along with it. Do you know what I mean?
Consent, yeah.
Yes.
And that their behavior leading up to any exchanges with women would have to be all above board. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's pretty radical, but I'm down with it.
I'm a radical. What can I say? I'm a radical feminist. When I was in university studying politics, I had this wonderful lecturer. Her name was Ursula Vogel, I think, and she reminded me of Edna Mode, from The Incredibles. Oh, she came out in front of the lecture theatre and she said, "Who here regards themselves as a feminist?" And I remember every girl and every woman in the auditorium put the hand up. Some of the blokes did. I did. I probably was trying to impress a woman. I don't know. And there was a rugger bugger behind me with his arms folded. "Oh, I'm not a feminist." Blah, blah, blah. And then she said, "Who here thinks that women should have equal opportunities and dignity to men?" And everyone put the hand up. And she said, "You are all feminists." And I was like, that's brilliant. That's all we need to explain. Equal opportunities and equal dignity to men. That's it. There you go. Hello. And so the day that everyone's sort of proud to call themselves a feminist would be a really good day, I feel.
Well, men and women alike. I mean, the problem, I admit, up until my early 20s, I didn't like calling myself a feminist. I really didn't. I always, I guess there was maybe some internalized sexism. I always thought that feminism was just I fell into the trap of thinking it was I don't know, divisive or something that didn't impact me. And then it was through kind of studying sociology that I was like, Well, I am actually a hardcore feminist. So yeah, that's where education, I think, comes into it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because if people don't learn about this, but it has to be inclusive education.
Yeah.
That everyone can access and that is for everybody.
Okay, so we'll leave it at that. And thank you so much for joining us today, Hannah and Tan. And this has been The Intersection on Labour Social, and we'll see you next time.